intersections of AI and economics research with you. I'll give you a brief overview of the presentation and then hand it over to Anand. Let's explore the exciting dimensions this field has to offer. 1. Introduction: Trends in AI. We'll start by discussing the latest trends in AI, highlighting how rapidly evolving technologies are setting new benchmarks in research and analysis. 2. Large language models, LLMs. These advanced AI systems are redefining data processing and interpretation, offering groundbreaking opportunities in economics research. 3. AI in education. AI's role in education is transformative, providing innovative tools for teaching and learning economics, thereby enriching the academic experience. 4. Research applications in economics. We'll delve into specific examples of AI applications in economic research, showcasing how AI aids in complex data analysis and decision-making. 5. Custom GPTs for specialized research, exploring the development of specialized GPT models tailored to meet the unique demands of economic research. 6. Addressing limitations and ethical concerns, acknowledging the challenges in AI, including ethical considerations and technological limitations, and discussing ways to address these issues. 7. Summary and future outlook, concluding with a reflection on the significant impact of AI on economics research and forecasting future trends and possibilities. This session aims to provide a comprehensive understanding of AI's role in economics, highlighting both its capabilities and challenges. Let's dive into this fascinating topic. Now over to Anand.
The last part was over to Anand, but I made a typo there. But all right. So as you could tell, that was an AI that was presenting that. So yeah, essentially, honestly, the AI would have done a better presentation than me, but then there would be no point of me sitting here. So yeah, essentially you got an overview of how I will go about this. Firstly, basically we look at what are the trends of AI. Then we look at what LLMs are, that is a large language models, how do they work, and why they're important to know the functioning of it. Then AI in education, basically looking at how AI, because of AI, education as a field is changing so drastically, and I think that it's the scope for a lot of research. And our department being like central to a lot of economics education research, I think this is a very important field. Then I look at research applications, basically looking at how we can use it for our research per se. And then we'll also look at OpenAI's custom GPTs, how we can make custom GPTs for our needs. And lastly, we look at some issues like hallucinations and giving incorrect data and how we can address those. And finally, I'll conclude. So starting with what is AI? So AI basically, in summary or in short, basically is a way or mechanism by which a machine can kind of mimics a human or human intelligence. So it can learn, it can reason, and then it can reciprocate, or it can basically reproduce the same thing in different ways. So if you look at different sectors, there have been a lot of changes, especially if you look at, for example, healthcare. There have been several AI models that can diagnose patients' diseases much more accurately than doctors. But at this time, because healthcare is a very sensitive sector where you don't have scope for error, there's still doctors necessary to make that judgment call on many serious issues. Finance, for example, in predicting forecasting, AI is very important. Then self-driving cars is something that has been on for many years. And the recent CES, which basically is the conference where all the consumer electronics stuff happened last week, you could see that most of the products had AI in it. So that is like the buzzword everywhere. Also, in terms of us or in terms of helping us, it definitely complements human capabilities. And I will show you how we can exactly use it to enhance our research. So for example, for us, it might be a personal assistant in research, in coding, in learning, in educating ourselves, in getting updates and news, and also automating certain tasks or assigning certain tasks to AI. So this is very important for us, especially because I believe that this is going to hasten research as a field or research in general. Therefore, it is very important for us to be adept with whatever whatever is happening in AI. This is a brief overview of whatever has happened in the world of AI. I know it's very dense, but since so many things happened, I could not cover everything. But just like in one sentence, let's say the first major breakthrough happened in November 2022. I think everybody remembers that. It was a big thing for all of us. Assignments could be done with ChatGPT and all. So at that point, ChatGPT 3.5 was the main LLM that we could use, or large language model that could be used. And it reached 100 million users in 2 months, which was unprecedented. The second fastest was TikTok, which took 9 months. So clearly, it has grown in popularity to a extent that was not imaginable earlier. Then in January, Microsoft invested 10 billion in OpenAI, showing how important it is or how much potential it has in the future. Then in February, Google came and started competing with Microsoft, and it released their own AI model called Bard. Then Microsoft released their own AI model called Bing, and that used GPT-4 technology as well. In March, OpenAI released their own GPT-4 model and also their art version of producing images, which was also completely new in the realm of producing high resolution images. In May, Google integrated AI across its services. So then you had AI assisted search engines, and also a lot of AI regulations came into place because AI could do things that probably were very sensitive, and it could find information that was probably very harmful for society in general. In July, GPT or OpenAI released a code interpreter, and Anthropic was another company that released Claude 2, which is also a very competitive AI model. Then Llama is one more model that was developed by Microsoft and Meta, that is Facebook. Then in September, ChatGPT gets these additional capabilities of producing images and also understanding audio, that is reading audio. Then in October, DALL-E was released, that is another image generation tool by OpenAI. And Adobe also came out with this text to vector in Illustrator, basically again an image generator. Then in November, Elon Musk announced that he's going to make an AI called Grok, which is basically a assistant that feeds in the information from Twitter and then operates based on that. Then OpenAI launched something very big, that is GPT assistants or AI assistants. I'll talk more about that in the coming slides. Then Sam Altman was fired and then reinstated again. That was also big news. And there were many concerns over something called Q-Star, which was basically a model that can do simple mathematical problems. And that was very problematic because people were predicting that would have the capability to eventually decrypt, let's say, insensitive information like bank details or even Bitcoin blockchain codes and all this stuff. So Q-Star was finally not released, but it was still something that was in the news for a long time. In December, that is recently, Google released their model called Gemini, and they have integrated it with Bard. So that is still available to everybody to look at it. Then in January 2024, that is this month, the latest that has happened is OpenAI last week launched their custom GPT store that has changed a lot of findings, and many of the findings of papers and a lot of use cases have also changed. Then recently also Perplexity AI, which is another search engine assisted with AI model that Amazon founder Jeff Bezos invested heavily. And basically he's trying to replace Google's AI and trying to be the dominant search engine. So what you can see through this is that there's been a high level of competition among these AI or these companies that are producing AI. And you can see the potential for it, and they're trying to get customer base because all these models improve based on training, and the more the users use it, the more the training it gets. So it's very important to capture the market in the first place. So therefore everybody is hopping in, spending a lot of money trying to get as much data as possible and trying to train their models. This is a brief overview of the number of LLMs that were produced since 2019, 20, 21. 21 to 22, you can see these many LLMs were produced. 22 to 23, you have ChatGPT there. 23 till now, you have ChatGPT 4 and then all these other OpenAI or other LLM models. So you can see right now, if you had to choose, there would be so many, and it's literally very hard to like say that one of them is the best. But still, I mean, you can use many of them and try to see which are better and which are not. I will do a brief comparison of some of the major LLMs in the coming slides. Now, what are LLMs and why do we need to know it? My main idea of understanding the functioning of LLMs is that we should know what the limitations are and how we can bypass it. So therefore, the functioning is very important for us. So firstly, large language models are basically AI algorithms that are trained on a large set of data. And then based on that, it is asked to predict whatever the responses should be based on a certain pattern or the history of whatever knowledge it has. Now, training a model is very expensive. This is a list of different models and the cost it took in millions of dollars. So for example, this does not have 2023, I think. So it is ChatGPT. GPT-3 is here with $1.8 million just to train it. So it is a really expensive process, and it's not something that each one of us can do. Therefore, companies whoever invests a lot in this have to get the returns. That is, they have to capture the market. Otherwise, there will be huge losses for them.
What's the colors in the graph?
So this is basically mid, high, and low is a prediction of how much they actually spent compared to, like, it's an estimate basically, and they're trying to say that high can be an overestimate, mid can be close to the actual estimate, and low can be an underestimate. That's what the report says. So training basically involves something like this. It's a procedure in which first you have large chunks of data. Let's say the whole of the internet is about 10 terabytes in text form. Then you process it through several GPUs, and these are huge computers with, let's say, 6,000 GPUs, and these are run for around 12 days, and the cost for running them is about $2 million. So you process all this data, you condense it into something like a zip file, which is 140 GB. Now it basically tries to make connections between all the data and try to make it usable, and that is what the model basically does. So the whole process is pretty complicated. It is not something that human beings can themselves instruct it to do. It is a program that kind of works by itself, tries to make connections, and it's a very complex process. Even computer scientists don't exactly know how it works, but you can just see how complicated the process is. So then comes the functioning of LLMs, and there comes the term neural networks. So neural network is basically a concept that is taken from the idea of processing anything. For example, in the human brain, we have neurons which basically are fired up and make connections to other neurons, which basically kind of makes a understanding of or connects different memory databases that you have and makes sense of whatever input you have got. So similarly, neural networks are trained in such a way that whatever input you give, it makes different combinations and predicts what the next word is. So based on that, it is a probability prediction model. So it can never be 100% right. And given that it is always a probability, you might get different results. Let's say if you change one of these words, which mean the same thing. So you can see it can be a little ambiguous in the long run. Like if you try many times, you might get different answers. So because of that, as I said, there is always a scope for error in the prediction of the next word. So how do neural networks work? As I said, it is difficult to understand. So we don't know why it has certain anomalies. So one of the examples that was very popular on the internet is called the error of the reversal curse, which basically, if you ask who is Tom Cruise's mother, it will give this answer, which is correct. But if you ask it the other way, who is this person's son, the GPT will say that I don't know. So this is still an unknown factor of why we don't know what the mechanism of the neural networks are, and therefore it is possible that a simple answer asked another way might give the wrong a simple question asked another way might give the wrong answer. And therefore it is important to be mindful of that while giving prompts, that whenever you ask a question, it does not necessarily mean that you will not get the answer, but probably you need to ask in other ways. So the first stage, as I told about the training model, is basically about the computer figuring out, or the large supercomputer figuring out how the connections need to be made. But after that, the computer by itself does not understand what it is doing. It is just predicting stuff. So there is another element of training that is called training with assistance. That is, what you do is you hire a group of people. Let's say you hire a big team, and you have conversations, or you send the group questions, and the human or the person at the end will basically write the answer. So what is basically happening is that human beings are training the model now, and then the answers given by humans will be compared to the machine's answers, and then it kind of gets trained even further of understanding what is the expected answer that you are supposed to give, what is it that makes sense. Furthermore, human beings can be used to basically see that what are the different outputs that the LLM is giving, and which one is better or which one is incorrect. So this is a training process that happens over time, and this will keep on getting better, and whatever erroneous answers you're getting right now need not come in the future. So therefore, there is a huge investment even in the second stage of training as well. So in summary, basically there are two types of training. First is the computer, which makes a base model. That is a very expensive process. And the second is the assistant model, in which human beings are supposed to interact with questions, give answers, and then the comparison between actual answers and the answers that the computer gives. And therefore, this is a stage of fine tuning. This is a list of all the LLMs, and these are several benchmark tests that basically rank the LLMs based on the answers. Now, if you look at the top, you will have GPT-4 Turbo. Now, GPT-4 is something that you might have heard of. Turbo is basically the same as GPT-4, but with a larger context window. What context window means is basically it can now keep a lot more words in its memory to analyze things. So basically, if you give a PDF to read and you ask questions from it, the computer has to assimilate the whole PDF in its memory and then look through everything to kind of figure out an answer. So the Turbo basically makes the context window larger, meaning that you can send larger files and it can interpret stuff from the bottom and the last end of the whole PDF, let's say, as a cohesive document. So you can see, firstly, I wanted to point out is at the last, there are proprietary and there are open source kind of LLMs. And you can see that proprietary basically are those models in which you cannot edit the training at all. Like whatever has been fed into it has been fed into it. You cannot change it at all. Where the open source are basically the ones in which you can see the code and you can see how the backbone of the whole functioning happens. So these are highly customizable, whereas this you can't really touch much. But at the same time, because it is proprietary, they have more, I don't know the reason exactly, but it happens to be so that proprietary softwares are at the top of the benchmark. And you have GPT, you have Claude, and again GPT, and then all the others, including Llama by Meta. So this is like a broad benchmark test.
You know what the costs are for some of these, the big ones?
The cost?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I don't have data. Yeah. Okay. So far I just told you a broad overview of what AI is, what the news or trends are in AI, also about what LLMs are and how it functions. Now, the reason why I included AI in education is basically because it is a field that is rapidly changing, and it is important to know these changes because I see a lot of scope that can be tracked from now itself, so that in the coming future, education, when it changes, you can keep a track of it and probably write a paper on it to analyze the changes. So based on this, you can devise several research questions from now itself because the paradigm is shifting very fast. So firstly, AI can be used in the learning process, and there are many examples of this. A few examples are something called Khan Miko. Now you might have heard the academy called Khan Academy, which basically has free lessons online. They have created a chat bot which basically you can ask questions and it will kind of guide you through the answer, but it will not tell you the answer per se. So it is like a chat bot which basically helps you learn, makes the whole process interesting. So whatever your particular problem is, it will understand that and guide you with your specific question. Kahoot, for example, is a chatbot that is a gamified version of learning, in which basically there's a leaderboard, people have to compete, and there's a score kind of a thing. So that's also a way in which they try to make learning engaging. Duolingo is another popular app which basically looks at your history of. It's like a language learning app. So based on your strengths and weaknesses, it tailors the questions that comes day by day. So that is another example of AI in learning. There are at least 30 of them that I know of, that I saw, but these are like just a few of them. So what are the key benefits that we see from AI coming into education? First is, so these statements are taken by a discussion group in Stanford University. So there are several documents on this, as well as there's a YouTube link in which they have discussions every few weeks. It's a very resourceful place to look at discussions in education and how AI is changing it. So in their discussions, some of the main findings that came out is, firstly, how AI will affect education is, first, that it will personalize the teacher's support, meaning that as a teacher, when you are trying to prepare for a lecture, you don't exactly anticipate what kind of questions you will get, or you don't even know if your explanation was sufficiently good, or were you able to convey the point properly or not. This AI basically listens to your lecture and then gives you feedback. Also, it basically asks questions specific so that you can know what people are, you can kind of prepare for it. Also, the AI will know what students are struggle with more, because it has trained data from previous, let's say, as years go by, it will get trained better. So you kind of know where to focus on more, and as over time, your teaching will become better if you look at it that way. Also, if you look at learning, there has been several debates about whether ChatGPT, for example, has enhanced learning or it has actually deterred people from learning because it gives the answers ready-made. So this is like a big debate because, for example, as calculators came, people thought that people will lose their ability to do mental math, for example. Is that important? Is that not important? It's always a debate. So that is also probably something that can be studied, I feel. Then fear-free learning environment is basically the idea that in a classroom setting, a person might not ask questions to the professor because the person might be underconfident because of the peers. So this AI kind of an instruction is basically, it fosters learning because you kind of ask more questions and you're not shy that you will be judged, for example. So it's a fear-free learning environment. Also, individualized learning experiences, as I said in the beginning, whatever your strengths and weaknesses are, the AI will know and will try to boost that particular gaps. And lastly, depending on what you want to work, like where you want to work, what skill you want, let's say you want to be a professor, so there will be a certain skill requirement. So the AI can exactly assess what are your weaknesses or strengths and tell you what you need to improve on. Or it can even say that based on your strengths, you should probably go to this field of work. So these are like the benefits that you can see, and probably a lot of scope of research in this field.
Before you move on, the personalized teacher support thing, that's like a thing that watches you as you give a lecture, and then
Yeah.
this is already a thing that exists.
I'm not sure about that. This is a discussion. So
Oh, okay.
I have not seen actual models about it.
It's like
Probably.
an idea that something people
Yeah.
could do.
Yeah. Now, there are some downsides also to AI. As the first thing I said, AI produces the results ready-made, and that is not the best way of learning things sometimes. So there's a lack of depth or curiosity-inducing framing in the way AI functions. So as I said, Khan Migo, for example, tries to address that by not giving the answer. And right now in ChatGPT's custom GPTs, or like OpenAI's custom GPTs, there are certain GPTs that don't give you the answer as well. So there are some coding GPTs that kind of help you do the answer but does not give you the answer. So that is basically trying to address this problem. But at the same time, it cannot stop anybody from just asking ChatGPT for the answer, and people will not stop doing that. So how will this affect education in the long run is also like a big question to ask. The other problem is accuracy and misinformation. So as you might have tested it yourself, whenever you ask ChatGPT, it gives a very coherent answer, and sometimes it's completely wrong. But only you will know that if you understand the concepts well. If you have not studied anything, you might just believe it. So there is no checks and balances in this process. So that is like one very, very major problem of just relying on AI to learn stuff. Okay, now in this section, basically I look at the applications of AI that can be used specifically for research or economics research as well. So firstly, I'll highlight the major AI chatbots that are there and also what it's supposedly best at. So firstly, ChatGPT, of course, everybody uses that. It's free. There is also plus subscription version. So this is a company. This is what it is best for. This is based on a survey. So it says that it's best overall. And there are several models which are good at only certain things. Then Bard is Google's chatbot that is trained on the Gemini Pro model. It is a free version, and even like it does not have any subscription at all. Claude is also one very good AI chatbot, which is again very like head to head with ChatGPT if you look at it. But apparently it is good for large inputs and document review. So this is not my my inputs. These are like surveys. So like you will have to test it out how good it is compared to, let's say, ChatGPT. The other three models that are kind of getting popular, firstly, as I told you about Perplexity, that is Amazon's backed search engine with AI. They have invested heavily into it, and they expect it to replace Google. So for informational search from the internet, it is pretty accurate. I have tried it a few times. I mean, I got pretty good results. So that also is free, has a free version, it has a paid version. Then Microsoft has something called Copilot. Now that is formerly called Bing. Now that is a completely free version, and it has GPT-4 functioning behind it. So you can, if you don't want a ChatGPT-4 subscription, you can always use Bing Chat, and it's like equally good. But of course, the custom GPT framework is only for OpenAI. Llama is the other one, which is designed by Meta, and this is completely open source, meaning that you can edit the framework, you can make many customizations to it. So, what are the capabilities? Now, if you had to be academic in our approach, there are only a few papers that actually look at how good these AI models are for research. One of the papers that was published in the Journal of Economic Literature, this was published based on the research done in September 2023. Now, the same parameters that were checked for, this has been done by another researcher, and that was updated in January 2024. So this paper is actually completely obsolete. Like, it does not have any relevance whatsoever, because in this time from September to January, things have changed so much. The models have trained by itself or trained on data, and the results on the same inputs are now much better. So given this latest update that we have, we'll look at a certain sectors or certain abilities of AI, and we look at how we can use it in our research. So we can look at classifications of the abilities based on, or categorize it to three. First is that it is highly useful, and we can incorporate this into our workflow, and it will definitely save time. The second is that it will be useful, but it definitely requires oversight. Therefore, you need to look at the answers, check whether it is correct, probably give a second prompt, a third prompt, try to correct it. Last is that it is completely experimental. That is, it will give random answers, inconsistent, and therefore it's not of any use. So these are the parameters, or these are the sectors of or capabilities that we will evaluate. So the paper or the research basically looks at these different abilities. So broadly speaking, they look at ideation and feedback, which is basically about brainstorming, asking feedback about papers, writing and editing. Now from this, you can clearly see that AI is done extremely well in terms of writing and editing. Like, there is very little need for oversight, human oversight, so it's like done the best. In ideation and feedback, there are some sectors or some abilities that is not very good at. I'll come back to this. Also, background and research, you can see that some places it is good. And if you look at literature search, for example, you can see that in the earlier paper in September 2023, that paper concluded that AI is very bad at literature searches. But now with the January 2024 update, it says that it's pretty good, but it still needs some oversight. So you can see that over time, things have started to get better.
Are these like the author's opinions, or was it measured in some?
Yeah, so these are basically the authors, after experimenting with a few prompts, the author found that some, like in general, the results are consistent or not. So the author, for example, gave a few examples with prompts and answers to show how good it is. Then it also, the author also looked at coding, and again, you can see that over time, it has improved in coding. Earlier, it was not very good. It used to give inconsistent results, but now it is pretty good. Then explaining debugging code also, it needs oversight, but it's still good. Then it also looks at data analysis and math derivation. So math derivation, you can see deriving equations, it was very bad at earlier, but now it is kind of improved over time. So these are the different abilities that could be looked at while doing research, and we need to see which ones we can capitalize on, which one can we use in our research. So I will look at just a few of them to which I found interesting, but I'll also forward like the links to all of these so you can have a look at the prompts and also why the author feels this is the case. And all of these are based on ChatGPT 4 or it is based on Microsoft Copilot. So Copilot is free, but ChatGPT 4 is a subscription based model. So based on that, these are the results. So I'll just look at a few abilities. One is the research strategy, which I found quite interesting. So basically, in the ideation and feedback, the research strategy is basically telling the AI model that I have a certain data set, I want to find a certain result, or I want to evaluate a certain thing. Please tell me what are the steps I need to evaluate it, or which model should I use. So this is basically a prompt that tells that this is the data set I have. This is what I need to find. It says that I like to estimate the causal effect of national school feeding programs in Vietnam, this on school enrollment, for example. So the prompt basically asks which research strategy would you recommend. Now this is only a part of the prompt or the answer, just because the answer is pretty long. But the idea is that the author was pretty convinced with this idea and it could be used. So it suggested a different approach and gave several steps on how you should go about it. It also gave an econometric model that you can use with variables properly defined and also using the specific data that was given. Like it did not do the analysis, but it suggested based on the data that you have what you could do. Now, why this is particularly interesting is that if you think of this, you can also use this to ask things like, suppose you have a data set with certain variables, you don't exactly know what you want to find, but you say that I have this data set, tell me all the possible questions that you can make out of it, and that has not been researched earlier. So that will kind of give you questions that you might never have thought of, and that is what AI can help you do. It can find loopholes or gaps that earlier probably it never occurred to, or it would never occur to you. So given a data set, there are so many combinations that you can use. You can probably control for variables that you never thought of, or you can even look at, let's say, cross-section versus pooled or time series, all these kind of questions that you might not have thought of earlier. So therefore, this research strategy I thought was particularly very interesting in our use case, for example.
Just a quick question. Earlier you mentioned that like the AI is not great at literature review. How come like they come up with like unanswered questions? Would you tell them like, here I have this data set, and they say, oh no, okay, this question hasn't been studied. But if they're not good at literature review, then maybe like the questions that they're coming up with could be already studied too.
Yeah, so depends on which model you're using. So in my recent playing around with ChatGPT 4, and I actually talk a little bit more about the research on literature reviews. Basically, I found that there was a company called Consensus that fed in a lot of information in terms of scholar articles or basically published papers, and that became the training model. And so now when you ask questions, it gives quite accurate answers, like beyond what I would have imagined. And that is very different from what ChatGPT 4 could give before this training was there. So even like a few weeks back, it would give very erroneous answers. It would say research gaps which are very general, for example, or it would make up papers that did not exist. But with this custom GPT that I'm going to tell you about, it gives you answers that are pretty much accurate. It needs still some oversight, and it also gives you links to papers, so you can actually click on links, open it up to see whether it is true. So because the training, or let's say probably earlier ChatGPT did not have access to the scholarly articles, as there might be a paywall or there might be some limitations to accessing it. The information it had was inaccurate. But now because it has been trained well by certain inputs, it gives you much more accurate answers now. So probably you should check it out, because the improvement over time has been quite considerable actually. Second, you might have tried this yourself as well. You might have given it a PDF or you might have given it a link to a actual paper and said that tell me or evaluate the paper. Now asking a prompt also is a something that you need to master, because as I told you earlier, it can give you erroneous results if you ask it a certain way, and it can give you good results otherwise. So if you ask, for example, this is a paper, and you say what are the limitations and strengths of this paper, and you say be very specific, avoid general suggestions, and always mention which section you are referring to in your comments. So now if you had not asked, or if you did not give this in your prompt, these last two lines, you would probably get a very general answer, and therefore you might conclude that it is not a good AI model. But just putting this makes the results very different. So based on this, it says section 224 has this, section 2.4 has this, so which is pretty good actually. But one thing to always remember is that this still needs oversight. So you can't trust it 100%. When it says a certain thing, you need to go to the section, read it for yourself to some degree, or just skim over it and see whether it is correct. So one more thing that the author found was that the AI models are very good at assessing qualitative papers, but very bad at assessing quantitative papers. So papers which have a lot of tables, for example, or a lot of figures, it kind of messes it up. It does not understand it very clearly. But qualitative papers have a very straightforward approach to it, or it can understand it quite easily. So just keep that in the back of your mind while you assess how good papers are, or asking this prompt. Then literature search, as I was talking to you about. If you ask it, let's say, give 5 papers from top economic journal that analyze the effect of something. Now earlier, if you had asked, it would have given you some papers with authors maybe in the field, may not be in the field. It might give you a year that there was no paper in that year, and it might just say some general abstract from some paper. But now with custom GPTs, the custom GPT called Consensus now produces even links to it, and the author confirms that this abstract or this summary was accurate. So even I've tried it, and it has been pretty accurate most of the times. So this is kind of an upgrade from earlier results, you can see. So
That's quite a stretch for top economics journals, but
yeah, whatever.
economic modeling and global public health.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay.
So yeah, basically this is the different kinds of results that you can get when you ask different prompts. You can always play with it. So the author, for example, tried 3 to 4 prompts, and based on that, it said that sometimes it gave very wrong answers. For example, if you say that give other papers from this author and tell me about the specific findings from these paper, or has the author done something in this field, it might not give you the answers. So it's still improving. It will probably take some more time to it, but yeah, basically whenever you get some information like this, the probability of it being right is higher than earlier, but it still needs some human oversight. Now this is something that I found pretty fascinating, that I myself had never done earlier. That is, if you give it a link to a website which contains some data, and then you ask it to find or make bullet points using that data, which is completely scattered over the website. I mean, not like inside the tree of the website on the home page, let's say. Then it actually goes through it, it will summarize things, and it will give you accurate numbers, which I found to be pretty cool. So this is also probably a use case that you would like to see. Maybe in articles like blog posts, or maybe summary articles which have a lot of numbers, you can just give the paper, or you can give the link to the paper, and it will extract the data from the website and it will give you a summary. So even this, the author says, this answers are perfect, the numbers are accurate. This is also something fascinating I found, and this I have also been using in my own analysis. That is, if you give it a table, for example, from a study, that is, you take a screenshot and you tell it, okay, based on this, let's say, given this table, if you ask, discuss the results for boys aged 15 to 16, let's say, versus girls, let's say. So this table is not complete. Basically, it has boys and it has girls, and it has age category as well. So what it found is that, firstly, the model extracted the data correctly, which column to look at, which row to look at. It got the data correctly. Then the comparison was also very accurate. So what this says is that even if you don't give the question to it, if you take a screenshot of a table and you tell it to find some results from it, it will give you correlations, or it will give you comparisons which you otherwise would not have seen. For example, I have used it in econometric models. If you give a regression analysis and you say these are the different specifications, now make a comparison of it. So it might first look at the coefficients, it might look at the p-value, then it will look at the standard errors for variables that you might not even have looked at. You would have only looked at, let's say, the major or the main variable of interest. So it will look at the R square, it will look at the R bar square, all these kind of things, and it will give you a cohesive kind of an answer which you would otherwise have completely overlooked. So there is again a lot of potential of using the function of extracting data in these AI models. Okay, so now comes the part of custom GPTs, which is something that was released only last week, and that has changed a lot of results, a lot of use cases of GPTs, and I'm going to talk about that. Now, this is also specific to research. So, firstly, what are custom GPTs? So, OpenAI has basically GPT models that you can train it by giving your own information. So you give it your own information, you give it your own set of instructions, and that is like the backend of the model. Now, based on that backend, now you give instructions, or now you, for example, ask a question, it will read through the knowledge base and then it will give you an answer. So now basically you have specialized the AI model for a very specific task or a very specific knowledge domain. So if you give specific instruction manual, for example, let's say you give an instruction manual about how a data is supposed to be analyzed. That is, you just say that, okay, first is the refining process. That is, you have to take column 1, column 2, remove the missing data or something like that, and maybe remove the outliers, all these kind of things. You give a proper instruction manual to it. Now, based on that knowledge base, you give it a data set and you tell it, clean it and give it to me. So it already has that in its mind, and it has very specific instructions. It will not go to the internet, try to search so many processes of refining the data. It will follow the steps that you gave it, and therefore your answer will be much, much more accurate. So the applications are that it will enhance your accuracy in your responses because you have trained it specifically on certain instructions. But custom GPTs are not as good as API assistants. Now, what are API assistants? API assistants are basically AI models that can be deployed outside the OpenAI interface. So ChatGPT has a website, and everything you ask happens in the ChatGPT website. But suppose you wanted to use the AI capability in your own website. Let's say you had a website that had, let's say, a large set of data, and you keep on updating it. Now you want the AI model to interact with that website. So that is where API assistants are useful. You basically connect the API assistant to your website, and then you say that this is the data in my website, use that data and always produce this. So it's like a model now. It functions in specific instructions, and it also gives you a very tailored answer always. So API assistants are better because the knowledge base is even more tailored. It is like it's your own website, and you can give much more complicated instructions on what to do and what not to do. So these are a few custom GPTs that I found useful in the past 1.5 weeks. In the coming in the future, you will find many more custom GPTs that will be much more useful probably. But with my usage, this is the ones that I found quite useful. Firstly, as I talked about, was consensus. This is a literature survey model that gives more or less pretty accurate answers, and you can ask specific questions regarding the methodology, the data set used, the year, the number of variables, and still it gives pretty accurate answers, which I was pretty amazed by. So given this level of accuracy, not that it is always right, but given a pretty good level of accuracy, you can ask further questions about, let's say, research gaps. Or you can say that these are the data that I have. Tell me other papers with the same data set and probably tell me what the method they used. So it will then give you a summary of it. Of course, it won't read through the whole paper, or it won't give you like the full paper in detail. It will give you a summary of it with a link. Now that is good enough to start your literature review. That's a good place to look at other papers with a good degree of accuracy. The second custom GPT that I found useful was Wolfram. Now you might have used this earlier, even before this custom GPT, for making graphs, for example. It's a very simple interface in which you have to just give a function, a mathematical function, and it will give you a graph based on that. So now, since Wolfram has integrated its functioning into ChatGPT by making a custom GPT, now you can just give text and it will make graphs based on that. Now, I did not know that Wolfram had some cloud resources in which it had some data sets already. For example, it had the census, it had some broad macro trends as well. So if you ask the Wolfram custom GPT to give you graphs or find trends based on whatever variables you have, then it will look into the cloud. If it has if it has the data, it will give you the actual figure. After it gives a figure, firstly it will give you a link as well. You can click on it, change the axis by yourself, or you can just give a text prompt again, telling that I want the axis to be different, I want the scale to be different, make the color different, and it does a pretty good job apparently. So Wolfram is something also that you should probably look at. Then diagrams is also something that was pretty fascinating to me. So in the next slide, I'll show you a representation of what diagrams can do. At this stage, it is pretty basic, but still it is pretty fascinating of what it can do at this stage. So it might become definitely better over time. Then website summarizer also is pretty useful in my opinion, because whatever website you're looking at, let's say if it's a report, it's a blog or something like that, and it has got a lot of stuff, you read through it, but you not assimilate everything. So you can just give the URL to it and it will give you a summary of the things, and that is definitely very accurate, like, because I have tried it many times and it has been very, very accurate. There's one more which is called website roaster GPT, which is my favorite. Basically it's a way in which you just give a URL, it will look through the website and it'll roast the website. It's really hilarious. Like, you can even give it presentations. For example, I gave my presentation and it roasted it very badly. So, and you can also give academic papers, it will roast that as well. So, like, really, really good. Like, I think that's the most ingenious GPT I have seen. Then the other end research that can be used is the interview transcriber. So for example, in qualitative research, you might have large, let's say, audio files of interviews and all. And generally, this work is assigned to an RA to basically transcribe the whole thing. So now these kind of GPTs basically take the audio file and transcribe it with pretty good accuracy. So it can be very, very useful. Video summarizer is basically, you give it a YouTube link, for example, it will go through the whole timestamp and it will summarize key points, which is also pretty good if you want to listen to interviews or look at lectures, or you just want to review concepts. You can just give a link, it will summarize things, and based on that you can ask further questions. So it's pretty good. Last is slide maker, which is basically, it can create slides based on a certain input, and currently it is not very good. It will give you PowerPoint presentations, or it can make it on Canva. It will give a very basic outlay. It is not good. Now, how I use slide maker is basically, I have made a custom GPT in that basically gives a LaTeX template. So this is more or less made with custom GPTs. This is whole presentation. Not that everything was correct. I had to give it like prompts again and again. But the idea was, I gave it a basic template of how I want the presentation to be in LaTeX. And I said that, okay, these are certain resources that I have. Now summarize this, give the key points and put it in a LaTeX slide. After I approve it, then move to the next section. So like that, as slides go on, you can see like you will keep on generating slides, and by the end it will speed up the process much more. So that is something that you can also do by creating your own custom GPT. Well, this did not come out as well as I thought, but okay. The idea is basically the custom GPT that made diagrams, I just asked it randomly to make something in economics. Now the idea is that it can make these diagrams, not that it is perfectly accurate or it is very pretty. The idea is just with a text prompt, it gave you, let's say, that kind of a diagram, or this is like a mind map or something. This one is something that was pretty accurate. I basically told it, give me a timeline about the evolution of AI. And it started with 1950s, 60s, and this data is very accurate. I checked this data and it's pretty accurate. Now, I would not particularly want it to be like this. I might want like a different timeline, and I can of course edit it. This is not very pretty, but it kind of shows that how the progress it has made over time. It has just been a week since this has come, so you can expect it to be much better over time. Now, since it's a custom GPT, I can also imagine people making their own custom GPTs on diagrams, and therefore even you can make your own custom GPT on this. So far I have talked about the applications of AI in our economics or research in general. Now, there are certain limitations in language models. Even after, like, if you look at most of the news, it is mostly hypes about AI, but there are so many problems that many people just don't talk about. And one of the major problems are the following. One is that it hallucinates a lot. So, for example, if you give it a code and you tell it, like you give it a question and tell it to code, it might give you a code and then you give the error to it. It might give you something completely different. It might make new packages, or it might say that you need to do this or that, and it completely goes on a tangent. So hallucination is a tendency of AI to give you wrong information or even irrelevant information. Again, incorrect answer is something that you might also have seen. That is, you ask a question, it gives you the answer which is completely plausible, makes kind of sense, it kind of connects each the dots. But if you look at it more closely, it will be completely incorrect. And I said coding errors, the same thing. Then contextual misinterpretation, misrepresentation, or misinterpretation. That is, even if you give it a PDF to train itself on, it might miss out the most important part of the PDF. So it might definitely not get the context in which you are asking. Then there will be biases. This is a problem that probably over time will become more, because as you train the model on more inputs, people's biases will become even more prominent. Let's say the whole population thinks in a certain way, then the model will kind of improve and become like start thinking like that, which is also a problem. So the main question is, how do you address these limitations? So this is a very important aspect. That is, given that there are limitations, there are some ways of bypassing them. Now, these are not particular like 100% foolproof, but to a large extent they do work. Now, in the beginning, I told you about the problems of LLMs and how it functions. So, as I told you, there was something called the reversal curse. That is, if you ask the question a different way, it gives a wrong answer or does not know the answer. So, how do you improve your question, or how do you get a prompt that gets the AI to give you the best answer? So, firstly, you can experiment with various styles. You can ask it in different ways yourself, or you can use another custom GPT. That was also a very interesting idea somebody had, and that's called prompt professor. Basically, you give an idea of what you want. The prompt professor will give you exactly what kind of a prompt you should ask the final model. That's whatever you want finally, and therefore it will give you a better answer. Also, try using different chatbots. So just don't stick with, let's say, ChatGPT. Use Llama, for example. Use Microsoft Copilot. Use Claude AI, for example. So this might give you different perspectives because the models are slightly different. You might not get you might not get a different answer from Microsoft Copilot and ChatGPT because they are based on the same GPT-4 model. But if you try different models like the Meta one, or you try Claude, you might get different answers. Second is, you can use the strategy of incremental questioning. Basically, just don't give, let's say, a whole document with 10 questions, or let's say whatever you're asking requires a lot of steps. It might get or let's say it might lose track after a certain point, and it might go on a wrong tangent. In that case, the best way to overcome that is to break the question down into several steps. So as I have tried it out, the first step is to just ask it, tell me the steps that would be involved in finding this answer. It will give you, let's say, 10-15 steps. And after that, you tell it, okay, do step 1, get an approval from me, and then further go on to step 2. So that is kind of breaking down the question, which is kind of then will give you better answers. So you can each stage you can correct it, get on the right course, and then ask the next section. Third, as I told you about, was contextual and procedural guidelines. That is, sometimes if you just ask it certain things, it won't know how to do it. let's say in economics, there are models, for example, that are not very popular or it does not understand. There's not too much of information on it. So use the steps that you would use to solve it. Give it exact, precise measures of what you would do if you have given this data. So based on that, you kind of are training the model to understand what to do given that specific question. Then outsourcing tasks and building custom systems. Now this is something that could be a complete presentation by itself because this is a very vast system. Like the idea is basically, as I told you about API assistants. That is, if you make your own website, you can deploy the functionality of ChatGPT on that particular website. Also, you can use ChatGPT on your own system locally. That is, you can download the capabilities of ChatGPT and let's say make it interact with files as well. So this is like the method of doing this is quite vast. If you look at the internet, you will find a lot of resources on this as well. And the last one to overcome the limitations is to use something called agents. Now, this is something that has been a very trending topic recently because of how fascinating it is in terms of its possibilities. Agents basically are entities that you create. Let's say you make a you assign a role. Let's say if you might have seen, there might be certain prompts in which they say that assume that you are a professor and based on that give me this answer, or assume that you are an expert at this field and based on that give the answer. Agents work in a similar way. That is, you give it a certain role and you tell it that these are the certain skill sets that you have. That is, either you feed it data, you say that these are the certain skill sets you have, and based on that, whenever it gets a certain input, it based on its skills, it will give you an output. You don't need to instruct it every time what to do. The agent will do it for you. So that is another way in which you can overcome a lot of limitations. So in summary, now there are not many papers kind of telling you about how AI is going to impact the future and how AI has evolved over time. So there are not a lot of academic resources on it, but a few of them. One of them is an NBER working paper that basically looks at a sample of customer support agents, and what they found is that the AI tool basically increases productivity, but it is not uniform. That is, people who are novice workers, their productivity increases much larger, but people who are experts in their field, AI does not help as much. Now these are very specific to this sample, but they try to suggest that AI has not reached that stage in which it can replace human labor completely. You still need human intelligence at this point, but people who don't know anything, AI can help them learn faster. But people who are experts at their field, they might not benefit too much from AI. This is a graph basically shows you or suggests what could happen in the near future. This is a fraction of tasks in, let's say, the world. This is the complexity of tasks, and there is something called the frontier of automation. So the model basically says that by 2023, there were a certain number of tasks which were automated. That is, simple tasks were automated. So over time, what will happen is the frontier of automation will keep on getting pushed. That is, more complicated tasks will also be taken over by AI. So as a result, there can be two outcomes. One is that human beings skills will become even more better. So the yellow part will push towards the right. Human beings will be more productive. So human labor will still be there, but the kind of work that we do will be much more skilled. The other is basically large scale unemployment. That is, AI will be able to automate everything. So no matter how skilled you are, you will lose your job. So these are predictions, like it could be either way. So to conclude, finally, what do we expect in the near future? Firstly, GPT-5 is something that has been in the news recently, and it is said to be a much more advanced model. So as I said, GPTs take a lot of money to train, and this will be trained on a much larger model, and it will have many more functionalities or much more refined functionalities. Q-star is something, as I talked about, is supposed to be a mathematics-based model that can answer simple mathematics questions without kind of relying on predictions. It can be very precise. Then agent swarms is basically an extended version of agents that I told you about. The idea is that, or this is also tied to the term of artificial general intelligence, in which the idea is that AI will be so widespread that is, suppose you make an agent and you tell the agent your job is to conduct a certain task, but to do the process, to do the process, I make n number of agents to assist you with this. So, for example, as a developer, if you run a company that has certain programs, you might have several departments. One might be a designing, one might be a management, one might be a coding, front end, back end, stuff like that. So the agents form is basically the one agent is assigned the task to make as many departments as it wants. Every department agents interact with each other, find a solution, discuss with each other. Then everything works as a cohesive unit, and finally the one agent that you gave the role to make more agents that returns the answer back to you. The idea is that over time you will see the answers are much more precise and much more you'll get many more innovative answers, for example. So finally, as a conclusion, the presentation kind of shows that AI has a lot of potential in terms of research, speeding up research, because now you have these models that will assist you in a lot of tasks, as I told you about earlier. Also, it can assist you in finding results that you might have overlooked, because the data can say so many things. Data is just a raw kind of an image of things. But the fine tuning or the particular details of the data can be found either by looking closely or asking AI to help you with that. So yeah, overall I see AI as a very useful tool in the future, and hope to see a lot more developments. Thank you.
Thank you.
What's your preferred model right now?
Uh,
Do you use GPT-4 or?
ChatGPT-4, of course, because of the customization it has right now.
Will you share this slide with me?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, I have a document in which I store all the links to very important articles as well as tutorials. So I mean, I'll be happy to share that as well. So, I mean, I personally think if people spend a little time customizing their own GPTs, you can have very good results with it. So, just in 1 week, you have so many GPTs coming out. And but many of them are very general GPTs. Like it just does a very general task, which might not be useful for everybody. But if you have a certain research field, for example, you can train it on that particular, let's say, PDFs or that particular field, and then you can tell it exactly what it should be doing. So as you feed more data into it, let's say in 1 year, as you're, let's say, in your third year of your PhD, by that time the GPT will have so much knowledge that it can tell you things to such a great extent that, let's say, you forgot about earlier, or might connect things that were otherwise very difficult to think as a human.
Are there any that allow you to like bulk upload data files to process, like
So
pull out of, or is that something you'd need like an API token for?
exactly. So if you want to do bulk uploading, I would suggest that you use AutoGen, which is basically you can download it on your own laptop. It's like a local computer, or basically it's called an environment, basically, in which every file is stored there, and then you just ask, let's say, the API, the assistant, to interact with these files. So the computing is not happening on cloud, but it is happening on your thing. So there's no limit of what you can do. Now, how good it is still, I mean, I don't know. But yeah, it can be definitely done.
Who do you think's better at an unbiased grade, two other students or an AI?
I'm an